Where are you even going as a potential extinction? Reckon it's that way? Ah, it's like we're about to take some corpses to that hill and die of this disease. All right, dudes, city of skyscrapers, beautiful Melbourne. That's not what we're doing here today, though. I'm not here to talk about skyscrapers. Look at that stuff up there. Beautiful Melbourne morning. Look at this thing here. Woo! I truly don't like the city, though, so we're gonna split. I'm heading out of town a little bit. A real life horror story from back in the day. This is gonna leave you guys stunned. I was. Let's do this. Here we are. Probably not exactly what you were thinking we were going to be doing. Little place called Point Ormond. Now, I'm not far from St Kilda, and a place called Glen Huntley is only a suburb or two away. And I want to talk a little bit more about a place called Glen Huntley, because the boat that sailed into this harbour in the year 1840 was called that very name, the Glen Huntley. And you say, what's this got to do with anything? Well, I'll tell you. 1840, December, a boat sailed into this harbour. It was destined for Melbourne. Now, as it approached land, there was a yellow flag swinging off the head of the ship. That's no good. A yellow flag means that the ship is contaminated with an unknown virus. Back in the day, they didn't really know where viruses, flus, they didn't know where they came from or how they spread. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But as that boat sailed into this bay, things took a bit of a turn for the worst. Now, the Glen Huntley had left a place called Gravesend, funny enough. It's a little bit ironic, that name, now I think about it, just mentioning it. Gravesend in England. And it was destined for Port Phillip here. But somewhere on the voyage, people started getting sick. Now, obviously a boat's never going to leave if there's sickness present in the first place, but said sickness was really starting to take its toll. And 10 or 12 people had already passed away on the boat on the way to Australia. Again, this is not good. They didn't really know what it was that was killing these people. History is going to call it a disease called typhus. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Typhus was the cause of this plague on this boat. So, what are they to do? Well, they raise the yellow flag on the mast of the ship. That alerts the coastal authorities, very primitive, we're talking 1840, but coastal authorities in 1840 could identify the flag, which alerts them to, you know, something's going down on there. They're not coming onto land because of said yellow flag and virus. Now, what happens next? Well, there's not really a quarantine process in place in the year 1840. Australia was not equipped with any kind of hospitals, or there was really no infrastructure in place. And as I look around this bay here today, well, let's just say things have changed, and it's very, very difficult to paint that picture. I'm going to just show you what I see out here right now. As you can see, we've got beautiful Melbourne City out over here. We have the bay. You can see in the distance, I'm not sure how well it shows up, that is the Spirit of Tasmania, the ship that sails between the harbour here and Tasmania. Beautiful. Way out in the distance, I can see some ships, cargo ships. This is the main thoroughfare for those. Things have definitely changed a little bit from back in the day. Now, not far from here, there was a place called, and it still stands, Elwood. Elwood Swamp was what it was known as back then. These guys weren't actually planning on going anywhere near this said Elwood Swamp. They were actually planning on docking the boat further down where Melbourne City is. You can see it in the background there, all the skyscrapers sticking up. That's where they were planning on docking. Didn't come to be because of this yellow flag, because people were already dying on the boat. There's no mention as to what happened to the 10 to 12 people of the about 157 people on the ship. This includes captain and crew, and obviously the passengers that were seeking a better life out here in Australia. Now, 10 to 12 had already perished at sea. There's no mention as to whether they were buried at sea or brought here for burial. I know on the hill right here, some burials took place. We'll talk about that as I get up to the summit here. On the very top of this hill where those people are standing is where some of the quarantined people who passed away were laid to rest. So, process of how it went down. The boat comes in, the yellow flag is up, the local authorities acknowledge the flag and they set up a makeshift quarantine down here on the beach. I'm not sure how much sandy beach there is down there. We're going to go for a little walk in a moment and see how much sandy beach, because on that sandy beach, that is where the quarantine was set up. So if we paint that picture of the boats out there, they're sailing people in on smaller little paddle boats because the bigger ship couldn't dock in this low sandy reef that I can see out here. It's very low. History or not history, that wouldn't have changed. So the sail ship couldn't get in and it wasn't allowed to anyway. There was one man that went out to check on what was actually happening on the boat. Let's talk about him. So a gentleman by the name of Dr. Barry Cotter, he was the one that had, well, let's just call it what it is. He had the balls to get on a little boat and paddle his way out there and board the ship to see what's actually going down on the actual scene. Now, when Dr. Cotter's got aboard the ship, being the man of steel that he obviously was, he's identified the sickness as typhus. Now, typhus's technical name or pharmaceutical name is Rickettsia prowazekii. I think I've said that right. Rickettsia prowazekii. And it's actually spread by body lice. So unlike the bubonic plague of the 1700s, which wiped out most of Europe, that was spread quite differently. It was spread by fleas. So fleas can jump, body lice does not. Body lice stays on us, it bites us, it gets into our skin, and that's how it spreads. So contact is more likely going to be the cause of its spread. It's not necessarily spread, and it's definitely not spread by coughing, sneezing, conventional flu, coronavirus. Diseases that we know nowadays are commonly spread via transmission, via body moistures, droplets, sweat, anything in our eyes, mucus, that's how they're spread. The typhus was spread by body lice. So it had obviously been picked up prior to setting sail back in Gravesend, of all names, Gravesend, but that's where it had been picked up, brought onto the ship, and it takes quite some time for the symptoms to really start to wipe people out. So the first 10 or 12 people, it might have taken a few weeks of sailing for them to come to and die of this disease. Common symptoms, well, what's the symptoms? First thing you're going to notice is the general things that we would cop when we're getting a cold today. Weakness, body aches, chills, a rash, and this is where the kicker starts to sort of come to be, confusion. Confusion is a big player in your demise if you suffer or are unlucky enough to contract typhus. Confusion is one of the things that will wipe you out the quickest. You lose, well, you can figure the rest out. If you get confused enough, you die quite quickly. Anyway, I want to get up to this summit. I've been waiting for some people to clear. This place is a real, it's quite a popular spot, especially being a weekend. So let's get up there and check this summit out. Come with me. So all these sightseers and morning joggers and stuff probably don't realise that in 1840, after the quarantine had failed and people had started to succumb to the illness down on the shore below, they actually brought the bodies up here to the top of the hill and buried them. I can guarantee to you that these guys have no idea that the bodies were buried right here. So it's hard to believe, like right here under our very feet is where the people were buried. Now they were later exhumed and moved. They were moved by the Department of Health in the late 1800s, so about 50 years later, they exhumed the bodies and they moved them. I believe a lot of them were moved to the St Kilda General Cemetery. I can't confirm that, some of the records are a bit of a wash. I'm not sure after being buried in a shallow grave on the top of this hill that there would have been much to exhume anyway, and I can't imagine that they would have been put in wooden caskets. I would have imagined that they were just wrapped in hessian and put face down or face up in a shallow grave up here on this hill. Off to the side here, we can actually see the beach that they speak of. Now, I want to go down there and just get a closer look on a closing note of this location. That is where the quarantine was set up. You can see here they've put this rock formation in, kind of like a bit of a mini dam wall. I'm not sure what that's in aid of. Maybe that's to separate the high beach to the low beach. I'm not sure why that would be there. This beachfront here, it would have been much more raw back in the day. It wouldn't have been this beautiful manicured bay, you know, like we see today. You know, pretty little boats out there, their little sails up, everything looks lovely out there. The wealthy people live out here through the district of Elwood. Wouldn't have been like that. This was a swamp. The boat was never intended to set here. It was obviously out here in the bay somewhere, anchored, and they were slowly bringing people ashore to quarantine. Now, the sick people were put in one section, the healthy people were placed in another. The sick people, as they slowly dropped off one after the other, this hillside up here is where they were buried. That's pretty raw, and it is unfathomable to imagine standing here on this beautiful day with all these people. Who would have thought that some of the most sinister burials in our pre-establishment history took place here? Can't see much sadness here today, to be honest with you. Just a beautifully, freshly groomed beach, a bay that's almost like a mill pond. Beautiful sand. Let's talk a little bit more about Dr. Barry Cotter. Did he live or did he die? This guy was brazen enough to get on a little wooden boat, paddle out to a ship out here that has a yellow flag on the mast, full of a unknown sickness at that point, and he's been assigned to go out there and see what's up. Wow. How many 30-odd-year-old doctors do you reckon would do that nowadays? Not to say that they wouldn't, because in medicine, those guys still to this day do spectacular things. We know this in our hearts, right? But back then, with no treatment, this could cost you your life, brother. That's a lot to ponder on. Question is, did he live or did he die? He survived. He survived unscathed. Now, when I talk about typhus, and we've learned now that typhus is transmitted, you can hear one of the big ships out there just cutting this story off real quick. Typhus is transmitted via body lice. Body lice is still a thing to this day. Like, we still get lice. Kids come home with hair lice. Well, that's the very thing that'll transmit this virus, this disease, this plague, so to speak. Back in the day, in the year 1840, they hadn't clicked on to what was even spreading this around yet. They didn't know. They'd blame things like smells, foul air, the boogeyman. Like, they had no idea what was wiping people out back then. It was only as technology came about, and I'm not sure what the year was, but it was far later on that they clicked on that it was the lice that was spreading this stuff. So that makes it very hard to decipher the difference between who's sick, who's not, and what are we doing to stop transmission? Because they're thinking that it's like in the smells of the air. They're blaming all this weird stuff that had nothing to do with any of it. You could have been healthy, sat in a spot where the sick person had been, pick up a piece of lice that had come off of them. The lice gives you a little bite on your skin, which you don't even know is happening. That's it. You're next. So the area here was known as Little Red Bluff back in the day. Wasn't known as Point Ormond or, you know, Elwood over there, that beautiful community out there. Look at all them beautiful houses out there. This was known as Little Red Bluff. My assumption would be that that would have been named by the Indigenous people and the first owners of the Australian land, the Aboriginals. It sounds very much to me like that is a name that they have given this place. And like I say, Elwood Swamp was out there in the distance somewhere. That's all that was here. So a bit of extra food for thought on this is that the ship name being the Glen Huntley, if you're from Melbourne or from Victoria, you would have heard that name before, and it's got nothing to do with the ship. The suburb Glen Huntley and Glen Huntley Road, not far from here, is actually named after that ship. And it happened deliberately. It was purposely named in a remembrance and out of respect to those who perished in this disaster. You've got to remember, 1840, these people are coming out here for a better life. They think that they're coming to this place where there's, newfound riches and a better shot at things. They've come and they've had tragedy on the way. Parents, children, crew have perished at sea. They're not to know whether they're next. And as they're dropping off, they're approaching this unknown land that just ain't turning out the way that it was supposed to for them. It kind of makes you wonder a little bit why the officials at the time didn't want to let the boat on the docks. To the officials and those that see that yellow flag, as far as they were concerned, and we've got to remember, Melbourne's only 5 years old at this point. It's a newly established spot. It's not even really a spot yet. We look out there now at like all the establishment and we go, there's so much to see. But back then there really wasn't. You know what I'm saying? And to the officials or anybody that was dealing with the boats that were coming and going, they looked at that yellow flag as a potential extinction on those that remained on the land here. Now you've got to put yourself in the shoes of the guys that observed this yellow flag. Let's put ourselves in their predicament. They see the yellow flag. They're aware that there's something going down on that boat. They're also aware that if they let that boat or any of those people come out here onto the land and infect, potentially, those around us here on the land, this could be an extinction event. They know how it goes down. They're not stupid. They've got history books. They know what the bubonic plague was. They're still absolutely petrified of it. I'd be the same. We still are to this day. Think back, it was only a few years ago. Look what we did to quarantine people in this day and age. So what actually happened to Dr. Barry Cotter in the end? I'd done a little bit of rough research about the man, and it turns out that he's actually buried in Swan Hill. Swan Hill's about, I'm only having a guess, 4.5 hours northwest of Melbourne. I don't know what took him there, probably found love. I think he would have been a pretty young doctor when he was on the boat here. I believe, off my mega memory, I believe it was about 1877 when he passed away.
Okay, this is the Find a Grave entry for Mr. Barry Cotter. Just a few key points I wanted to point out. He did die, my memory was good on location on the day. 1877 saw his death. If you work backwards, he would have been about 40 years of age when he boarded the ship. Other thing on here worth noting is he was a freshly married man. Right there where it says M 1838. By the calendar, he'd only been married for about 2 years. Directly beside that, you see that little girl's name there, Frances Laura Snodgrass. She was born in 1839. That was his little girl. So Dr. Barry Cotter was not only a freshly married man, he was also a new father, yet he was still brazen enough to board this death ship.
It's hard to believe that this was a quarantine station. Look at that. You can't see it, can you? Well, I can't, and I'm standing here. It just looks so beautiful and picturesque. Does not look like sadness. It certainly does not look like we're about to take some corpses to that hill and bury them. Taking the dead from here and burying them up here on this beautiful hill overlooking the bay. Okay, as I walk up the hill now to Point Ormond Lookout, I need to piece together the last segment of this story. We're going to the St Kilda Cemetery. I believe that there was a memorial that was erected long after the tragedy that unfolded out here in the bay. I want to go there and see what remains. You guys are coming with me. That's next. Let's do this. Welcome to the beautiful St Kilda Cemetery. I don't know where I'm going in here. I've been here a lot, but I don't know where we're going to find this memorial. Okay, after a bit of snooping, Glen Huntley, Pioneers Memorial, immigrants who died from typhoid fever. Typhoid fever, they're saying now. that's a little different. Okay, number 38, which is back right-hand corner according to the map. So I've come in the front gate and I'm going for a big walk. There is a gate at the back, so I can scoot back out the back there onto that Alma Road, or Alma Road. Let's get walking, man. We've got a bit of a mission to get down there. I should have come in the back gate, shouldn't I? You know, nothing surer. If I'd have come in the back gate, the memorial would have been right up the front. So you don't, you come in the front and it turns out the memorial's right up the back. Is that just Murphy's Law or what? And I did see a car sneak in the front gate. So it does turn out that you can get a car in here. Like the road's big enough, look. It just appeared to me like they didn't want cars in here. Turns out I was wrong. I've never seen cars in here and I've been here quite a bit. You guys would have seen the St Kilda Cemetery turn up on the channel before. Wow, look at that on the way past. I don't mean to get too sidetracked, you guys, but check this out. Beautiful piece, look at that. She's missing her arm. She looks super sad too, missing that arm. My wife, Susanna Smith, age 64. Stop it, we're not going down there. We're just not going down that rabbit hole today, sorry. Got to stay focused. They're digging holes up here. It's kind of what they do in these places. That's a lot of dirt. Maybe it's garden mulch. Yeah, that's mulch. Lucky. Don't you find it a bit strange that that note on the gate here said typhoid fever, yet the history book says that all these people died of typhus? Pretty significant difference there. I'm just thinking as I'm walking through this place, but you see how different stories can really conflict the path of history. So online resources and the history books say that typhus was the cause, yet the gate here, which is fairly official, it's a cemetery, it's put together by, the information at the gate you would think is put together by historians. They say the Glen Huntley disaster was typhoid fever. That's weird, mate. So I've nearly made it down to the back gate where this pavilion is, and by the map it seemed to be off to the right hand corner down here somewhere. So I'm just gonna sort of go for a bit of a snoop and see if we can find it. Don't think it'll be too hard to find. It's literally right beside the roadway. That looks like it. That's our boy right there. Beautiful. I remember the photograph online, you could see this, it says other denominations, A compartment. I remember that. And there was a tree and stuff in the background, so I knew roughly what I was looking for. Glen Huntley Pioneers Memorial. This is us. It's not very big, but I guess it's noted. Like, look at the size of this monumental, that's 3.5 stories high. They didn't get that kind of a deal here, but it is what it is. All right, normally I wouldn't bore you guys to death reading monuments and stuff because, well, let's be real, it's just boring and we all fall asleep, right? I'm gonna read this one, and the reason for that is that I believe that the stories conflict real bad. So from what we've studied online and what I've presented out at the lookout today to what's written on here is very different. It's very twisted up. And the history books, well, they tend to do that. Let's have a read together. You can leave your thoughts in the comments as to what you think actually went down. Here's what I'm reading today. On December 13th, 1839, the immigrant ship Glen Huntley left Greenock, Scotland. Straight away that's different because we were talking before about a place called Gravesend in England. But let's roll with Scotland. It arrived in Hobson's Bay, 17th of April, 1840. Okay. Many of the passengers suffering from fever were landed at the Red Bluff in St Kilda. That hasn't changed, that rings true. 24th of April 1840, that took place. It was the first quarantine station in Victoria. Okay. A few days later, John Craig, James Mathers and George Armstrong succumbed to the disease. They were interred at the Bluff. That rings true, okay? It goes on to say, owing to the encroachment of the sea, their remains were exhumed and removed to the St Kilda Cemetery in August 1898. That kind of rings true as well, right? It was done by the Board of Public Health. Memorial was erected by public subscription to mark a notable event in the early history of the colony. You see what I'm saying, how the story gets a little twisted? Does it really matter? It doesn't matter. Like, the ship was approaching Victoria and it didn't go to plan. John, James and George, it appears that they were the guys that were potentially buried, although there was 10 to 12 that died at sea, and a potential 50 in total. That leaves 40 odd people that died on that beach. 3 of them were exhumed, and does that mean that they were brought here? Are we standing near those guys right now? I'm not sure. It kind of reads like that's where they are. The grave is actually the same size as a normal grave, so that rings true to me. Did they put whatever was left of those 3 dudes in this hole? I'm not sure. It's a little bit vague. We'll never know. The truth is, we weren't there. Now there's another little plaque there at the bottom. That is a commemoration placard, and it's been put there by the descendants of John, James and George. Those descendants, future descendants, have obviously chased the same story as we have today. They've came out here and done a bit of a restoration on the grave. Now it's always nice to see that family descendants do, they do a bit of their family tree. It's generally something that people do when they're north of 40, 45 years of age. When you're younger than that, you just don't care about it. It's just a story that your grandparents are telling you. You get a little bit older, I don't know, something in the mind sort of switches and you start to want to know more about it and where you came from, and especially if it comes with a tragic tale, just like this. It is fascinating to be able to link your life to a tragic one that happened prior to you even being thought of. Now, I stumbled on this story by mistake. I was scrolling Facebook and came across it. The more I read into it, the more I just got glued to it and found myself in that rabbit hole. Having said that, the more that I read, the less that I could find. It's truly been twisted up and lost to the history books. You guys have seen that live time with me here today. What the stone says is different to what the gate says. What the gate says is different to what the history books say. That happens a lot with historic stories. They really get jumbled up and twisted around, and everybody puts out a different version of the actual event, which leaves us all scratching our heads. You guys can do whatever you want to do with today's information. Do your own research. Put your findings in the comments maybe. We could talk about it together. But I'm going to leave this story here, and I'm going to get moving because I'm getting sunburned, and I'll catch you guys next week for a whole new adventure. But for now, it's your buddy Sharpie signing off. Bye everyone.